So I'm going to kind of shift or pivot us just a little bit, because I think where we're headed was really helpful. But if you are unaware, maybe let's say that you're in an unhealthy relationship or there's an unhealthy posture towards money, how do you recognize that? Because I think sometimes, like you were saying, Adam, well, if I just ignore it a little bit, I can get good at ignoring it in the minute, but it produces some of those longer term tensions. And so how do you just in the moment recognize within yourself, like, oh, I'm just avoiding, or, maybe I still do have that partner that I love and trust, but there's some fear there. And so in that moment, when a hard conversation comes up, like how are clients, how can you recognize that? How do you enter into that space?
I think the thing that is the most obvious is if they're having a lot of disagreements or arguments about money, or if money conversations turn into these kind of big fights that they can't seem to sort of come back from. So that would be the most obvious one. But, some more subtle ones, like if you feel like you have to hide purchases, like I'm going to make sure that Amazon order shows up while my partner's at work and I'm going to sneak it into the house. That might be an indicator. If you're hiding any kind of spending, or if you're socking away, right? If I'm hoarding some of the family finances and not telling my partner this money that I have because, a lack of trust or fear. If it's not feeling like a partnership, if it feels like I don't seem to have a voice in the decisions that are made, my partner kind of makes those decisions. One sort of scary one that I see show up is, everybody has their strengths, and you might have one person in the partnership who's really good at managing money and managing the bills, and the other person has no idea where the money is, how the bills get paid, like just the actual logistics of it. They are just unaware of. So it's like, what if something happens to your partner and you wouldn't know what accounts to log into? Like they just kind of hand it over to their partner. They really don't know what's going on. Or if it's feeling like your partner really controls the money. So those are some ways that it might show up that, hey, there might be some issues here that need to be addressed. Adam, is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah. One thing I'd add is there is a compromise solution. We've touched on this a little bit already, but Dana just said it right there. Sometimes one partner is good with money and this idea that I'll just take this over. The other partner actually feels relieved by that and is like, yeah, you go. But they get too role defined and there's too little conversation about money, and there actually needs to be more. It feels good in the short term. We get that. Like this person feels relieved, this person feels in control, and it looks blissful in the short term. But the downside is, big expenses come up, or big job transitions, or retirement, or something like that. And they really aren't on the same page necessarily with when retirement's going to come, what retirement's going to be like, what a business transition would look like, how much debt were we carrying or not carrying, and those all of a sudden become these ruptures that, again, if they were just in communication along the way, they might have been, one partner might be more understanding of, oh, this is why we had to take on that debt. You got a doctorate or you got a whatever, or this is why we had to have this happen. But the problem becomes the surprise. And I've sometimes seen that it's that surprise debt, the surprise spending, the surprise bank account becomes a rupture of trust. And ruptures of trust they're just hard. They come into our office around a lot of issues, whether it's money, sex, whatever. And they just take a lot of time to sort of mend. And so that's why we got to stay in constant contact around money, because even short-term compromise solutions can have that unfortunate consequence down the road. So that's all I'd add.
For either one of you, any guidance that if you have those roles that maybe are a little too defined, what does it look like maybe to take a step towards having those conversations? Any idea, any guidance on, maybe how often those conversations would be, or things that we definitely need to encourage people to include in those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, how often those conversations happen, I think would be dependent on your lifestyle. And, like in my household, I get paid once a month. My husband gets paid twice a month. So we could have that conversation once a month. That would be sufficient. And it's okay for one person to be that primary budgeter of that. I think a good thing is to play into each other's strengths. So that's okay for one person to hold that role. But do we have conversations where at least the other person is aware and knows where everything is? So sitting down on a regular basis and just walking through like where our money is, how that money gets budgeted. Are we on the same page about those things would be, I think, so there's short term, how money looks month to month, paying bills, staying on top of that stuff. And then long term, how does it look year to year? How does it look over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? And the extent of those conversations, like when do you guys come into the picture, with longer term stuff? It's like, are we sitting down having these important conversations to make sure we're on that same page?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like maybe a check-in on a month-to-month basis as we look at cash flow, and then maybe, less frequent, but still important long-term conversations on a year-to-year basis, or maybe more frequently, might be a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
I think it's a good rule of thumb. Another thing I might add on to that is if you find yourself, hey, I'm in the manager role. Mm-hmm. One thing is if you look at the budget and you're perfectly happy with it and you're not making any compromises, that should be a warning sign to you, actually, right? That should make you go, wait a minute, I might not have talked enough with my partner here. Because if there's no even little point in there where you go, yeah, I kind of had to give that section to them. We kind of had to do that trip, or we kind of started to, that is a sign to you, oh, wait a minute, they're letting me totally take it over. So that's one thing I'd say. And if you're in that manager role, you find yourself in that, you really got to work hard to invite your partner, to make it safe to connect. Like, hey, I want to be, this is something I have to tell to my wife, because I sometimes have the tendency to get in that manager role. I have that big response around money and I have to manage that. But I have to tell my wife, hey, I value my connection with you more than what happens with our money. And so I want to talk about it, because even if I'm going to disagree with you about some of these points, it's better that we openly disagree than that we silently agree. It is better that we talk about it and have that connection and dialogue around money than that I get everything I want in the math of it, right? And so that's the thing that, like, someone like myself, I got to make it safe. I got to stay chill. My wife and I, we have this little thing. Money's hard for us to talk about. I'm much better at helping other people talk about money than I am doing it myself in my own relationship, for whatever that's worth. But, we have a thing. It's going to be on a date night, and we're going to get dessert afterwards, usually, if I have a money talk. We're going to reward ourselves because it's hard for us. It's hard for both of us in different ways. And so that's, again, just making it safe, making it a calm, stress-free environment if we're going to have that conversation, because it's complicated for us. So
it's great. Good counsel.
Yeah. So, Adam, I think this was really helpful in just framing that. I think that idea of, okay, even if the conversation is hard, entering it is worth it. And then if you know that it's going to be hard on the front end, let's figure out ways that we can make it less painful and then reward yourself for doing it. Like, I really like that, even just picture of, hey, we know that this is going to be a hard thing to do. There's going to likely be some stress and emotion. And then let's make sure that we know that there is some sort of a release at the end of it. I think that kind of overarching narrative is really helpful to think about. Like, okay, I know that I'm going to do something hard. And so let me make sure that there's some sort of a release point. So, as I think about when those clients have conflict, what are just ways, if they've avoided it for a long time, or they just know that it's going to be hard, they just know that there's going to be emotion, conflict, they're not ready to go in, what are maybe some steps that people can take just to make that first step towards having these conversations?
One thing I'd say, and I'd love to hear what you have to say on this, Dana, is what we know is the natural inertia of life. We will avoid having these conversations. And I would say there's good research that suggests that most couples wait 3 to 5 years in clinically significant distress in their relationship before they seek help. So I'll probably put in a couple plugs for this, but let this be one plug. We don't do it well on our own. We usually need some help if we're in a heavy, stuck place in any aspect of our relationship. It's interesting to me, and I love working with a lot of men to help them have healthier marriages. I work with couples, but I especially love encountering men because men actually really like couples counseling once they get into it. There's actually good data around that. We're usually the ones dragged into couples counseling, but we actually enjoy it more oftentimes when we do it. And that might sound bizarre, but we tend to like the outcomes of it. And what I really like is, it's easy for a lot of men to think, man, I'd get a business coach. I'd get a financial advisor. Why wouldn't I get this external help for the most important thing in my life? It's actually, if you just did the math, it's a pretty big asset, whether or not you stay married. And so again, I would just say, again, this is my plug, go see an intermediate third party. It doesn't need to be a long course of therapy. It could be a marriage seminar, a marriage workshop. Some of them really specifically focus on finances. There's something Dana and I are actually going to lead a training on the next 2 Fridays. We're going to train ministers and therapists in doing a relationship checkup, which is just a 2-session. Let's talk about one topic and let's lean into it. Let's have a more compassionate conversation around it with a good and wise guide. And then let's launch you into developing a new and healthier habit around that one topic. And so I could talk all day about getting a relationship checkup, but that's, to me, I tell all my friends every year, do a relationship checkup, do a marriage seminar, do something, because there's something we just don't do well on our own. It's just marriage just has this inertia where we will avoid hard topics. We will avoid the hard thing. And so, yeah, do therapy. There's my plug. Dana, I'm sure you have more specific advice than that.
Well, as I think about the question, I'm imagining 2 types of listeners. I'm imagining a spouse listening by themselves, thinking about, gosh, I would love to be able to have this conversation with my partner, and I don't know how I would approach that. And then I also imagine a couple listening together, thinking, maybe they have some struggles with money and they really want some answers on how do we sit down and talk about this. So to the person that might be sitting by themselves, I think how you approach it is really important, and coming to your partner and saying, I think this might be an area of struggle for us. And I'm wondering if we can sit down together and just really have a heart to heart. I want to be open with you, and I want to hear how you feel too. Is there a way we can just create the safe space to share with each other so that we could get stronger and better at this? As an invitation, when on a blind side, we don't want to just jump into the conversation, but can we set a table that says, can we come to this with compassion and curiosity and kind of get to know this part of each other a little bit better, so maybe we could find success here. And same thing to the couple that might be listening, to work together to create a safe space that says, I'm willing to listen to you. I'm willing to sit down with you. And one tip I would give, and I think this is really important, is that before talking numbers, strategy, budgets, actual math, we need to talk about the emotions of it. So I think some, key questions like, who taught you how to manage money? Where did you learn? What messages did you receive about the role money should play in life? What hardships did you experience? And listen with new ears, right? Even if you're married 15, 20 years, tune into your partner and say, I want to be really curious. And with specific to money, I really want to learn you, right? And come with that perspective to stay curious. And then what does money mean to you, right? Does it mean power? Does it mean freedom? Does it mean self-worth? What does money mean to you, and what value does it hold for you? Is it about, it provides security, it provides college education for our kids so they could do better than we did? Or like me, it provides experiences to travel the world and see things, or maybe it is things like you like luxury items and, whatever that might be. And then what fears come up around money? Fears around not having enough, spending, if we're in a season of life where maybe we're spending more than we make and, we're panicking, or maybe we're putting too much on credit cards and we're not paying them down, or we're paying interest, or, oh my gosh, we have this debt and I walk around with this heaviness because it's high and when are we going to pay it off? It's like, what are the fears that are there around how, you're living your life right now? And then we can start to talk about maybe goals, aspirations, ideals. And then one question that I find to be really important, and this is a hard question to ask because when we ask it, we have to be willing to hear the answer. How do I make you feel when it comes to money and our spending and how we live our life and our lifestyle? How do I impact you? Right? Do I, because maybe how do you make you feel controlled? Or maybe I treat you like a child, or maybe I treat you like you don't know how to do this stuff, or, how do I be willing? The hard part is be willing to hear the answer and stay there without judgment and compassion. Like, how can we move through these this emotional minefield around this? Because if we can get into connection, then we can do the math, right? And do it successfully.
Yeah. I think that question is so powerful, Dana. How do I make you feel when we talk about money? Even just thinking about that in the significant relationships that I have, either with my spouse or my kids, as we're trying to raise our kids to use money wisely. I want to help them learn and grow, but I also don't want to be manipulative with them as I'm teaching them about money. I want to let them have experiences and fail and know that they're still loved, but not have them under my thumb of you must spend money like this, like I do, or like your mom does. But I think coming back to that question with a spouse, I think that's really powerful. How do I make you feel when we talk about money? Thanks for sharing that. That's good. So I do want to ask, we do have clients that are thinking about generational. How do they pass on wealth and wisdom wisely to their kids and grandkids? And so when you think about conversations with the next generation, with either kids or grandkids about money, how is it similar or different to conversations with a spouse? Are there ways that you've seen it affect the next generation?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things I would say is hopefully, going back to attachment theory, is talking with our spouse, the most important person in our life, is the most emotionally complicated thing we do. And so hopefully that talk with the grandkids or the adult children, as they've grown, becomes a little less complicated and we can unwind that. But again, I think open communication and valuing relationship, I know for me, there becomes a sort of how in my role, right, as an adult, child, with parents and with kids, I'm right in that between there. I appreciate, my parents' generosity, right? But I want us to talk about that relationally, right? Mm-hmm. There's many grandparents who they make a decision based on their values about what they're going to do and give. And maybe it's too much, or maybe it's in a way that isn't very relational, right? And sometimes I think, oh, hey, I know maybe you didn't talk with me when I was your kid and I was in your house, but now that I'm an adult, we should have more of a collaborative sort of dialogue around this. I want to have a relationship with you much more than I want, generosity in X way or another. And I also see on the flip side, some grandparents sometimes feeling pressure, to give in certain ways to match, the other grandparents or whatever it is. And they're not talking about their own feelings, maybe of resentment that can bubble up, or maybe of a pressure and a worry of disappointing. And the saddest thing to me is when I have someone in my office who's sharing those feelings with me as a therapist. And I go, oh, that would be, what a heartache that they're missing out on an opportunity to share this with their significant other in their life, because there's an opportunity to build a connection, to build an intimacy bridge here around some of these feelings you're having, and to have an open dialogue that I think will actually lead to better math problems. I like better solving of math when you can, again, I love what Dana said. I think she just nailed it. We can't repeat that enough. Let's center the relationship and center the emotions. And if we can start there, we're going to do all the other stuff really well. I have a toy in my hand I picked up. So I don't know if
I'd like to just share more from a personal perspective. I don't know if I have enough experience in looking at couples in terms of generations, but my own story comes kind of immediately to mind when I think about that in two parts. The way my parents were, which I imagine, I was this 70s, 80s child. So this is, I imagine, culturally probably pretty common at the time. Like, it wasn't talked about how much money someone made. You don't ask that question. So my parents were very like hush hush about, I didn't get to know anything about their financial picture. And so with my own children, that has influenced how I'm very open with my kids. I want them to see, like, this is what it looks like. This is how I do it, right? So because it was so hidden then has influenced me to be more open with my kids. And the other piece is, my dad was blue collar. He was a police officer, and they did not save or provide for my college education. So I had to do that on my own. That's part of why I served in the military. I had to put myself through school. I didn't have that safety net to grow in that way. So that's another thing, like from the time my kids were born, putting money aside every paycheck, saving for their college education, because I didn't want them to have the hardship I had. Now, but that could be a good or bad thing, right? Because I think a lot of my character was built on my having to kind of, forge my own path. But that was something that was important to me. I wanted my kids to have the benefit of that and to go into their college education with the ability to focus on that without worrying about the money part of it. So I do think generationally, like how we are brought up and cultural messages we get around money definitely influence the next generation. But I think how we talk to our kids is really different. Our spouse is our partner, right? So we're in this equal partnership. Whereas with our kids, we're the teacher, we're the mentor. So they're two very different roles, I think, in what those conversations look like. I'm not making financial decisions with my kids, but I am making them with my kids in mind. And I want to teach them, right, how to be successful in their own life around money.
Yeah. But I like how both of y'all framed it. It's still, no matter whether it's a spouse or a child, the relationship is valuable, and honoring them. And Dana, with you having a little bit older kids, they can probably ingest what you can share with them about budget and finance, where I have young elementary school age kids where if I told them how much we made, they would think we're bazillionaires because the value of a dollar is so different and they just have no way to frame it. And they would think, why can't we afford everything because of what you make? But I think, again, coming back to the relationship, how do I be honest and open and vulnerable with these loved ones? How do I have the simple conversations now so that down the future, that relational foundation is there, so that if there's a question, they feel freedom to come to me as a loved one, as someone that has their best interest in mind. I think if I've heard y'all speaking, a lot of it kind of comes back to that, is how do we lay this framework of not of fear, but of this place of intimacy, and that we are together and we are in a deep place of relationship with one another, that there's trust and value.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to share, I don't know how much time we have left, but I've found it to be a really useful metaphor. I stole this from Dr. James Cordova. He might have stolen it from somebody else, but I stole it from him. But this is a really good metaphor to help couples realize what their position is. Again, the most prominent pattern we get into is that spender-saver pattern around money. And I really want to encourage couples to hold these images, these metaphors in mind when they approach their partner. If your partner is a saver or an investor, they sort of view life as a high wire act oftentimes. And if they are well trained at doing a high wire act and they have a netting underneath them, then they might be able to do that high wire act with abandon, with their head up high, and they might be able to be walking around on the high wire act of life. As long as they know they have that net there, they feel safe. When a spender comes in and asks for a vacation, what they need to realize they're asking for, can I take a little bit of this net from underneath you? Can I borrow a little bit of this, so we can enjoy something over here? That doesn't mean they shouldn't ask, but they should ask with a sensitive attunement to, oh, wow, my partner kind of feels like they're on a high wire, and all this money is this netting underneath them. And they really need me to honor, respect, and attend to they're going to have a little bit of a fear or unease response when I ask to spend, right? And so that's if you as this, again, the spender, approach your partner with that sensitivity, it's going to go a long way in the conversation. On the flip side, I really want the image for many couples to have is that person who likes to spend. Just imagine yourself as a child on Christmas Day when you were young. And imagine you got the Red Ryder BB gun, you got the go-kart, you got the cool toy you wanted. And I want you to imagine your parents say, you know what? I want you to take that go-kart and we're going to put it in a box today. You're going to get to play with it next year, and we might even get you 2 go-karts next year, but it will be a year from now. And you're like 6 or 7 years old. How are you feeling if your parents says, hey, we want to put that away for a while? No, right? Because to a spender, money is about savoring the moment. It is about engaging in experience. It is about freedom and all those things. And what you're saying is, I'm going to restrict you. So if the person who's more of a saver just realizes inside their partner who's a spender is still a young child on Christmas. And it doesn't mean you don't have conversations with them about saving, but it means because you love them, you think about their emotional reaction to asking things to be put aside as you approach them. And I think if we could hold those images firmly in mind, we could enter into conversations in a much more caring and connected way. And then again, do the math well on the other side of it. So
I want to add to what Adam's saying, because I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it, like how to hold compassion for one another. And part of that, I think, is being able to see the strength in the other. And when you can see the strength in the other and allow for their influence, you can find a really happy middle, right? So if I'm the conservative saver, but that's all we did, how much are we really living and playing, right? But if we are on the other side and we're the spender and that's all we do, well, then we have no security, right? We're not planning for the future. So either one of those things in isolation isn't necessarily a good thing, but those two things balanced, right? The saver's focused on making sure we have enough and we're planning for the future and have security. And the spender is making sure we're living in today and experiencing and enjoying life. If we allow for each other's influence, we can find a balance of those two things. So it's really important as you're having those discussions and learning about your partner and being able to empathize with their position. It's also valuing the strength that their position holds and allowing for their influence.
Adam, Dana, thank you all so much. I think even just those illustrations that you just shared, it's just such a helpful way to finish this conversation. For those that are looking for counseling help, what are some ways they can reach out to you guys if they're in the area, or do you guys do things virtually? Just how can people find you guys?
So we are a group practice. We offer both in-person and virtual sessions. Our practice name is Healing Hearts Counseling. Our website is marriagecounselingknoxville.com, and you can reach out to us. You can call us 865-283-1777. Any one of those ways to reach us We're glad to talk with you and make sure to get you connected with the right counselor for whatever you might be struggling with at this time.
Great. Well, again, thank you all so much. We will provide those links in the show notes to y'all's website as well as that phone number. And again, we're so thankful that you guys would come and spend this time with us. For clients, if you have conversations about money that are hard, that are challenging, that raise that conflict level, we would love to talk with you. We'd love to help you even find resources like Adam and Dana that would be willing to have these conversations with you, that would be another intermediary third party. If you're not a client, we hope that this was helpful for you guys, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Take care. If you like these financial planning videos, please share it with a friend, and if you have questions, go to our website at seriousretirement.com. This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We are located in Knoxville, Tennessee. You can visit our website at seriousretirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents. Advisory services offered through Retirement Planning Services, LLC.